What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Berk, aka Dansgwait here, and welcome back to the Final Fantasy X Auto Battle Challenge. We have made it to the end of the road. In the last part, we finally reached Braska's final Aeon and tried to complete the storyline of this particular challenge. It's been an incredible journey and I've enjoyed every minute of this whole process, from testing out the idea for the first time, to actually trying it, playing it, to working on it, trying out the new format for the videos, seeing the incredible response that the series has got. This entire journey has been wonderful for me, so I want to thank everybody that's been watching so far. There's been tens of thousands of you that have been intrigued by this challenge and entertained by it, and that want to see how far it's going to go. So especially for this final storyline part, I really would appreciate those likes once again, as you guys have been doing so wonderfully for the entire series, like more so than pretty much any content I've made. There's been a series up until this point. You guys have been awesome, and I really would appreciate another big showing for this particular video as we reach Braska's final Aeon. So without much further ado, let's get into it and talk about the journey to defeat Braska's final Aeon in Final Fantasy X Auto Battle Only Challenge. So I think it's worth a little bit of a recap, because if you are watching these as they come out, it would have been like at least a couple of weeks since you saw the last one. And so the first thing that was worth mentioning about Braska's final Aeon is that you have a fixed battle team with the restrictions that we have. So we have to do this battle with Yuna, Tidus, and Auron. So especially Auron is a character that we've not really worked on as much until this point in the series, because we've been going with Tidus, Kimahri, and Wakka, and Yuna's had her own little bit and she has been progressing over the course of the game, but in terms of her attack she's still very weak, and we've used her mostly as like a tank sort of character, and we gave her an Auto Phoenix and she's kind of helped us to get out of trouble. But when you put all of these ingredients together so far, Tidus is the only character who's seriously ready to be taking on Braska's final Aeon. And in the first attempt you could see that both Yuna and Auron were suffering, and they also weren't really helping me in terms of the damage. So Tidus was doing well, and he shows signs of potential for actually defeating this guy, but only having 1 out of 3 characters optimized for battle was probably not the best way to do this. And so my first attempt obviously didn't end well. Especially with that second form, because things start to get a lot more dangerous with that huge sword swipe attack, and of course the upcoming ultimate jet shot that is going to do a huge amount of damage to my party. So although we had a decent enough run against Braska's final Aeon the first time, it wasn't enough to defeat him, and I had to kind of take a step back and prepare once again to defeat the most difficult storyline boss in the game. Up until this point, there's not been that many battles where something has been absolutely essential in terms of status protection. You can kind of get away with it. But for this battle, it felt like Stoneproof was an absolute must, because Eject Beam, as you've seen in the first attempt, is extremely dangerous, and it's not the kind of thing that you can kind of hope to get away with and not really see much of in the battle, or hope that it doesn't connect or anything like that. So we did have to have Stoneproof for Tidus, Auron, and Yuna moving forward. So that was already one thing. And in terms of the raw stats, everyone had to at least be about as powerful as Tidus for us to be in with a shot. So after the end of the first battle, there was definitely potential there, but I had to take a little bit of time making some preparations. So let's have a look at those and see what I was doing before my second attempt against the big guy. So I began a new session, and as you can see I am 16 hours and 49 minutes into it. So I reached Braska's final Aeon with a challenge that should have been more restrictive in a very quick amount of time. I mean, a speed run for this game without utilizing any kind of skipping sort of cutscene skippers or any glitches or anything like that is about 10 hours anyway, like 9 to 10 hours. So getting here in 16:49 was really quick. Obviously the reason for that mostly is because of ×4 speed being available. But even despite that, I still kind of got to here quicker than I thought. I wasn't expecting that. And so I was kind of ahead of schedule. I thought I might have to do more grinding in this challenge than I did. And so the fact that I made it this far, and I knew that there was scope to go even further. Obviously, once I made it to Braska's final Aeon, I started to think, you know what, if I do defeat Braska's final Aeon, how far can I go? I know many of you watching will of course be wondering, so how far can you actually go in the post-game? So there's Omega Ruins to go, there's Monster Arena to go, there's Dark Aeons to go. Are these guys beatable with this challenge? And well, of course, I had the same questions on my mind. Now, what I did know was that obviously if I wanted to do something like that, I would truly need to utilize every available resource in the game. This would mean maxing out as much of the sphere grid as possible, but also of course it meant gathering as many different pieces of equipment and items for customization as I could as well. So a lot of things that normally you would steal from enemies with Riku or anyone else who knows steal, they're not available to you in this particular challenge because obviously you can't use the steal command. And certain things are dropped pretty rarely, they're difficult to find, and some things are just straight up impossible if you're not able to steal and you're not able to bribe. And so I thought to myself, a good place to start, especially since I'm considering taking this challenge basically as far as I can and going beyond Braska's Final Aeon and towards like the super bosses of the game, would be to do a round of capturing. At this stage I knew the characters were strong enough to do the capturing necessary to be able to kind of unlock a lot of the different items in the monster arena. So my first port of call was to actually visit the monster arena, get the relevant party members prepared with capture weapons, and then head back out into Spira and just start capturing basically at least 5 of every enemy, and if I needed more of them then capture more of them to unlock as much of the monster arena as I could. Now the initial reason for this wasn't to be able to fight them, to specifically like unlock and fight any enemies, but it was of course to get those sweet rewards that the trainer gives you as a result of doing this capturing. So that was the primary objective, and the secondary objective, as I've already mentioned, is that Yuna and Auron are not ready at this stage. They don't have the stats necessary to truly take on Braska's Final Aeon. And especially once you start going to the more difficult places in the game, then capturing enemies is going to give you a decent amount of experience points, and I felt like this would be a nice way to kind of bridge the gap and get those other characters up to speed as well. So I gave capture weapons to basically everyone who could potentially be relevant after this stage, and I used this as an excuse to level up characters and to also gain a lot of potentially useful items for Braska's Final Aeon and for the potential battles ahead if I could defeat Braska's Final Aeon as well. Now, this was going to be pretty difficult because one of the main ways in which you can speed up the monster capturing process is to flee. Every time you have someone that you don't want to encounter, you just select flee. So let's say you're in the Omega Ruins and you're after a Varuna or something, and you encounter something you don't like a Master Tomberry, then all you really do is just flee and you save yourself the time and the risk of having to fight it. Now with this particular challenge, that's the main thing that's a problem in terms of capturing, because you can't kind of shortcut by allowing yourself to flee. Again, could you do it? Of course you can. You can just say, you know what, who cares? I mean, I'm more interested in not using anything other than auto battle or attack for any battle I actually want to engage in, like against a boss or against something I need to capture. So of course, it's everyone's sort of challenge for themselves, but I've always done my best to try to stay loyal to the philosophy of the challenge. And well, this is something that makes it genuinely more difficult when you're in the difficult areas of the game. The fact that you can't escape, and if you're trying to capture that one Varuna, you might have to fight 50 other difficult enemies just to capture that one Varuna, and there's no way to kind of avoid the others because you can't escape and you can't use flee. And if you use no encounters, then you obviously get no encounters. So there was no kind of middle ground here unless you basically broke the rules of your own challenge. And so that's something I didn't want to do. And so it starts off very easy, it's not really a problem. You can just kind of hang out in basically from Besaid up to about, I would say at least like Gagazet 2, without having any kind of problems. You can just use whoever you like, from like Tidus, Waka, Yuna, even Auron as well, and Kimari. And any of those 5 basically would be fine for the earlier areas of the game. So that was basically what I did. Obviously I'm going to be skipping ahead majorly here because there's not much to discuss. It's just running around on times full speed. You have auto battle on, and your characters are obviously just strong enough to slice through everything, and you capture most stuff in 1 hit. And even in the sort of intermediate to later areas, things are going to be like 2 hits at most. So we'll skip ahead to some of the more like difficult areas so you can see this particular process of monster capturing in this auto battle challenge. So you can see we're up to the Calm Lands, a kind of intermediate to later stage of the game, and as I've been saying, everything is a complete breeze. So in terms of the battles themselves, there's nothing to worry about here. But once I got to the Sunken Cave, obviously it's a little bit annoying because this was one of the first areas of the game where you had 2 enemies that you needed to capture, but both of them were relatively rare encounters, and you had the magic urn as well that would constantly keep appearing. So it was one of the most like grindy areas of capturing that I'd done up until this point. So you can see, I mean, you're starting to gather some sphere levels as well, and Yuna is moving along the grid and starting to get stronger with time. Like for her, the strength was one of the main things, but she was already up to 44 by this particular stage. I mean, 44 wasn't enough, but we still had a lot of the hardest areas still to come. So I think just from monster capturing alone, it was looking clear that she'd probably have the stats needed to take on Braska's Fine Aeon as well without any problems. So the Sunken Cave was definitely a little bit annoying, and I did have to spend a bit more time kind of grinding in here. As always with the Sunken Cave, general recommendation is if you do want to take on and capture stuff like the Tomberry and also the Ghost, then you need to go to either the back room where you can access the Chamber of the Faith for Yojimbo, or the quote-unquote green room. Those two are generally the best areas. Like the back half basically of the Sunken Cave is where you're likely to find the more difficult and rare enemies here. I'm pretty sure they just do not spawn. Like near the entrance you're not going to find any Tomberries or Ghosts, so that's generally the place that you want to head. And thankfully, because there is a save sphere near the end, what you can do of course is to basically go to that area and generally run around the save sphere. And so anytime you're encountering too many magic urns and you're getting those annoying, like you get it wrong and it does that attack that hits everybody for like 1,000, 1,500, something like that, then of course you can sort of just basically go to the save sphere, get your HP back, and you can continue saving along the way in case anything goes majorly wrong and something happens that you end up regretting. So yeah, this area was a little bit frustrating obviously because of the sheer amount of time it could take to find what you need. But originally I think I decided to just go for like 5 of every enemy. Unlocking Nemesis by capturing 10 of everything was kind of like pointless at this stage, because in my mind at this stage getting to Nemesis was basically impossible because I knew what was to come. But I knew for a fact that I didn't need to capture more than 5 Tomberries and 5 Ghosts at the moment, so that wasn't too bad. And I just sort of stuck it out until I got the encounters I needed, and I was able to make it through the Sunken Cave eventually. But it was one of the areas that definitely took a little bit longer because of the restrictions that I have with not being able to flee and not escaping the battle. But there was one final thing that I did while I was in the Sunken Cave. Now this is kind of funny. What you can do, of course, while you're here is to hire Yojimbo. So obviously you might be thinking, why would you want to hire Yojimbo? Now people who obviously, again, you have a decent amount of knowledge of the game, you'll know that if when you're hiring Yojimbo, you pay him 3 times his asking price, not only can you hire him, but he throws in 2 teleport spheres to sweeten the deal. And at this point, I'd been doing a lot of grinding through all of the kind of capturing and stuff that I'd done. I'd had a ton of weapons that I'd sold and all this kind of stuff, so I had a lot of Gil at my disposal. And I thought I still have a lot of the most difficult enemies to come, and so Gil was not going to be a problem at this particular stage. So I thought, why not just hire this guy, get the 2 teleport spheres, because it can sometimes be a little bit annoying to get. Like, there are ways to get them without having to do this, of course. But I thought, you know what, while I'm here and I'm already doing all of this stuff, and I have the Gil to burn, let's just get 2 free teleport spheres, in case we're trying to make some more specific kind of weapons that we might need for something. Because of course at this point there is a whole, maybe you could get the celestial weapons, but I decided to keep the celestial weapons to one side for now, and just focus on basically defeating the boss and trying to do it with the non-specialist kind of celestial equipment, and see how we do with that. So yeah, Yojimbo was hired for this run, but it was for the teleport spheres rather than actually obviously using him, because we can't with the restrictions that we have. So yes, we picked up old Yoji along the way. And so after about 2 hours of this on times 4 speed, I had made it to Zanarkand already. So I was making very, very good progress here. And I'll show you guys what the Dark Flan looks like now with this particular setup. Once again, you can see the notable strength difference for Yuna here. She's still struggling. She hasn't picked up that many sphere levels yet because we've been fighting the lower level kind of enemies. But Tidus and Waka are getting the job done here. Now, you might be wondering why not Auron. At this stage, I thought, you know what? I'd rather just keep my absolute kind of strongest team out there. Yuna's a little bit more of a priority for me right now. And Auron, you can see, he has got 42 sphere levels to cash in as well. But I thought to myself, Waka has the accuracy and Tidus has the higher kind of luck. So with the more difficult enemies I'll be facing, that are the flyers for capturing, I thought, let me just do that. It might be a little bit easier for me to sort of capture enemies that I need. So I kept Auron out of it for now. Getting sort of sphere levels is actually not that difficult once you have a team that can kind of take on the harder enemies and defeat them pretty easily. So as you can see, I mean, Waka and Tidus are just so strong here, and they have the accuracy and Tidus has the luck. And so there's pretty much nothing that can evade us that's a random encounter. So it just made the whole capturing process smoother. If I put Auron there too, so if it was Tidus, Auron and Yuna, then we have the situation where Yuna's pretty weak compared to the others, and Auron is even weaker than Yuna in general because he hasn't cashed as many sphere levels in. or accumulated as many, and so we were going to start to struggle to capture things in the late area of the game. And so since my main focus was on the capturing itself, I think Auron can sit this one out for a decent chunk of it while I just make sure I get this done. But even the most difficult captures like the Dark Flan, as you can see, because of the sheer sort of brute force of Waka and Tidus, we're still able to get the capturing done. So it wasn't too much of a problem, even for the more difficult stuff in the caves of Gagazet. Of course, one of the things you've got to keep doing, you've got to save along the way. You have to make sure you're doing lots of regular saves, because anything can go wrong at any time. You can have crashes, you can have obviously like in-game fails, anything can happen. And so, especially when monster capturing, man, if you're in that groove, it's very easy to get lost in it. And before you know it, you've captured like a whole bunch of things, and then something goes wrong, and you've lost all of that progress. I've definitely had people tell me in the past they've lost like big chunks of capturing progress, especially if they do it the way that I'm doing it, and they end up getting to the most difficult areas at the end, which I think a lot of people will do. And then of course you get that like great Malboro encounter or something, and you kind of forget to save for a while, and you've lost a lot of capturing progress. So it's something I'm guilty of doing as well. Like on live streams, there's always people kind of yelling at me to save, and it's always good advice. And so yeah, it's something that I always try to pass on. It's like you've got to save regularly when you're doing these things, otherwise you're going to be punished for it. But even as you can see, like end game stuff here, end game random encounters, a lot of them are getting blitzed out, and it's not too much of a problem. Now, once I reach the City of Dying Dreams, again, we have the Great Malboro, and now that's a great place to make the captures, because you don't have the sort of auto ambush kind of situation that you have in the Omega Ruins if you're trying to capture Great Malboro. So I was kind of happy about that, and I thought, yeah, this is a good place to make sure I capture my Great Malboros. But then I thought to myself, you know what? It's also still not going to really save me, because when I go to the Omega Ruins, I can't flee. So normally, obviously, what you do is, especially if you have an underpowered party, if you're trying to be smart about it, you'd say, okay, I'm going to capture my Great Malboros inside Sin in the City of Dying Dreams, where it's a little bit easier because you don't have as many ambush situations. Then when I'm in the Omega Ruins and I get ambushed by a Great Malboro, I can just flee. And so I won't have to deal with the more difficult variant in the Omega Ruins. But obviously that doesn't apply to me here. So it was kind of like, I should still capture the Great Malboros that I can here. But unfortunately, it wasn't really going to benefit me as much because of the restrictions of the challenge. So as you're seeing in the background footage here, second time around, I'd made sure to get as many of the chests as I could, because I was even stronger than my first run here, and there was even less chance of something going wrong and me getting some kind of sudden game over. And so I took the time I needed. I'm trying to capture enemies anyway, and so it was just a case of continuing to sort of run around and blitz through. And I think the City of Dying Dreams is still the only one where there's some level of risk when you're trying to capture. So I'll show you guys that as well. I already mentioned it when we actually had the encounters against Behemoth King, but in case anyone forgot, when you use capture weapons against Behemoth King, you don't have to deal with the meteor counter. So Behemoth King is a non-factor when you're capturing, which is something I was always very glad about, because it does make life a lot easier, especially when you want to capture 10 of them and you have like a low-level party or you're doing some kind of challenge. It definitely makes a big difference not having to deal with meteor every time you try to capture one of these guys. So definitely very, very useful. And so about 2.5 hours into this sort of capturing session, I was already at the City of Dying Dreams, ready to capture some of the final enemies that I needed to. So a lot of these guys, again, are easy. The main one I was worried about still was the Great Malboro, because I can't break the damage limit, and so I still need to do a certain number of hits to be able to capture it. So Behemoth King, once again, getting absolutely blasted. And let's see what happens when we encounter a Great Malboro this time around. Demonolith also can be dangerous because of Pharaoh's Curse. This is where Auto-Med comes in, as you've seen. Auto-Med is the remedy for Pharaoh's Curse. It's like the best way to deal with it. Tidus is the only one that has it, but even for him it's kind of enough, I think. It's not too much of a big deal. You saw there, Waka doesn't have the protection, but we have sufficient stoneproof protection here for it to not be an issue. So Demonoliths, yes, you saw, like, compared to everything else that we've been facing, they still pose a threat, but in general they weren't too bad. And now we have the Great Malboro, so 3 hits, and Yuna's doing half the damage, and as a result, we still had to take that first attack. So there's still a chance we could take a bad breath from Great Malboro, so that could be a problem. And obviously, since we need to capture at least 5 of them, that's still the only thing that could have given me a game over in this particular thing. So let's see the encounters, because they're on ×4 speed as well. You can see how I captured the Great Malbros in this particular section. So now that I had safely saved, it was time to just basically run around here and see if I could encounter enough Demonoliths and Malbros to get the job done, and basically only leave Omega Ruins. At this stage I kind of had to make a choice, like, do I need to do Omega Ruins now, or the items that I've picked up so far from all of the other encounters, is that enough for me to kind of just progress against Braska's Fine Leon and leave Omega Ruins to be like a post-game area. In general, for you guys that have seen my Final Fantasy X content so far, I tend to try and not really touch Omega Ruins until I've already done the story, because at least in like the HD remaster versions and stuff, and the European PAL versions on PS2, the Omega Ruins bosses are more difficult than Braska's Fine Leon. Well, at least Omega himself is more difficult than Braska's Fine Leon, so I tend to see that as a higher level area in general, and so I try to save that for after Braska's Fine Leon. And this run was likely to be no exception unless there was something specific that I needed from the Omega Ruins to actually fight Braska's Fine Leon and maximize my chances of winning. But for now, the plan was to not do Omega Ruins, and just to finish off by catching the Great Malbros and the Demonoliths while I was in this generally safer area compared to Omega Ruins as well, because you have the save sphere very nearby, and the overall level of the encounters is generally lower than what you're going to face in the Omega Ruins. So of course, after I captured the first 4 Great Malbros, I had a long series of encounters where I didn't get another one, but it was nice for me to get the experience points. Now you can really see the experience shooting up. And once again, I generally maintain my philosophy of not trying to super overlevel, even though I had the sphere levels here. My main priority was to try to get everyone up to roughly Tidus's level, and then see if that would be enough to defeat Braska's Fine Leon, and then kind of cash in sphere levels that were left over as I needed them, just to see, like, get an idea of what the kind of minimum stats needed would be in order to get the win. So that's why you're seeing all of these stats kind of build up, these sphere levels build up, and not be used for now. But there was definitely going to come a time when we needed them, either against Braska's Fine Leon or in any battles beyond him if we get that far. So I decided to keep those sphere levels handy. But I must have had about 15 encounters or something where I didn't encounter a Great Malbro, but it was all good experience points for Yuna as well. And then finally I got encounter number 5, so went for it once again. Let's see if we get Bad Breaths. We do not, and so 5 encounters in a row where I had no Bad Breath against Great Malbro. Very different experience from the first time I was going through the City of Dying Dreams, but thankfully with that I was done for now, and it was time to check in on the Monster Arena and see what kind of goodies I had, and if I did have 5 of everything so far, at least. Okay then, so after about 2.5 hours worth of capturing, I had basically captured hopefully 5 of every fiend at least, from Besaid all the way to the City of Dying Dreams, and only Omega Ruins would be left with fiends uncaptured at this particular stage. So with this I decided to talk to the trainer and see what gifts I was going to get as a result for all of my hard work, and see which of those I could put to use against Braska's Fine Leon. So let's cycle through these and see what we're going to get from the trainer. So first things first, we do pick up the Mars Sigil for Auron, which could potentially be very useful, because what we do know about his Celestial weapon, if we choose to use it in the future, is that his mechanics are actually much more suited to a challenge of this particular type, because as his HP drops, he gets more powerful. So if we're using Celestial weapons and we're trying to face Monster Arena enemies or Dark Aeons, Auron might be a better frontline member than the others because of his weapon. And so being able to capture enough to make sure you get the Mars Sigil is definitely a good idea. Definitely one thing worth doing is that if you do have a lot of certain items, let's say you have, I don't know, 50 to 60 Mega Phoenixes for whatever reason, then you've got to try to make sure you cache some of these things in before speaking to the trainer and you're getting all of these items in bulk, because obviously the game doesn't let you have more than 99. So let's say theoretically you had 99 Mega Phoenixes, you spoke to the trainer and for capturing he gave you 99 more. Obviously you would have wasted 99 of them because you already had them and they basically just get sort of tossed out of your inventory, and you can't have 2 sets of 99. So it's something, to be fair, it's something I didn't check myself. I should have checked it, but in general, obviously, if you're ever doing this, you should try to make sure that you don't waste resources by kind of overfilling your inventory. But Mega Phoenix 99 was definitely a great start, because obviously we needed those Mega Phoenixes for some Auto Phoenix armors that we could be making in the future. So definitely a good find. Next up we have all of the fiends from the Thunder Plains, which gives you 99 chocobo wings. This is hugely important because of course this is how we get auto haste, and auto haste was one of the most important things I had to consider in this challenge for like high level battles, because it's so hard to get due to the restrictions. Normally what you would do for chocobo wings is to use bribing, or if for whatever reason you couldn't do that, then you could always steal them from like Cactars, and I think Cactar King has them available to steal, stuff like that. But the main ways to get chocobo wings in this game is not accessible to me. And so this was one of the primary ways and the only way in this entire run to get chocobo wings in bulk. And so this was super important, but it also meant I only had one person that I could give auto haste to basically for the entire game using customization. So that's also a very important note. So these chocobo wings are very important, but I was also super reluctant to use it because it's a one-shot thing. You have to make one person. You don't get the option for anybody else by customizing. So definitely an important thing to pick up from the Monster Arena for this particular challenge. But I will be trying to manage without it. So even against Braska's Fine Leon and stuff, I'll try to get through without using it. Now interestingly, Lunar Curtain is actually even worse than chocobo wings in general if you want to farm them in large amounts. With chocobo wings you can bribe, but with Lunar Curtain there's no bribes. So you get 99 of them for unlocking Abaddon. That's one of the main things, so that's the one you're seeing on your screen right now. Now it is a little bit of a pain, but in a normal run you can kind of steal your way to getting enough of them to make another auto shell. But of course no steal in this game. So literally only one of my characters can have auto shell in this particular run as well. So that's another important note to make. Only one auto shell is going to be available because we can only get 99 of these one time and there's no enemy drops for them in the game. So that's already auto haste and auto shell where you can only make it for one person with customization. So it's very important. Now light curtains are a little more interesting because you can have a plentiful supply of light curtains in this particular challenge, but only if you are strong enough to defeat one of the stronger enemies in the Monster Arena. So you pick up 99 for doing this particular like capturing stuff, but then if you want any more of them, obviously again with steal not being an option, you have to defeat Fafnir. Now Fafnir has like 1.1 million HP or something if I remember correctly, and so you have to be at those kind of levels. But if you can beat that guy, then you can end up getting 40 light curtains every time you beat it, and so auto protect potentially for like the highest level enemies. Let's say you make it far enough to face something like the Dark Aeons, or you're facing the original creations in the Monster Arena, you can get yourself auto protect because obviously you'd be strong enough to defeat Fafnir by that stage if you can make it that far, and so you can farm for light curtains. But at this particular stage, once again, for like Braska's Fine Leon kind of level, and for like maybe Omega Ruins and that kind of thing, you basically only get one auto protect because you're not going to be able to farm for the rest of the light curtains that you need in order to have another auto protect. So it is also very limited, but it can be unlocked to basically unlimited light curtains much later into the post game. Now Jose is one of the most important places because with that you can pick up 99 petrified grenades, and as I've been mentioning, stoneproof in my opinion is almost essential for Braska's Fine Leon, unless you're going for a completely different kind of approach where you become absolutely ridiculously OP without going to Braska's Fine Leon, and you get the celestial weapons and you're already doing like 50,000 a hit and you can take it out in 3 hits, then obviously you don't need it. But if you're trying to have like more of a kind of fair battle against it and trying to do it the way that I've been doing it, then you do need the petrified grenades. So that's why I got the petrified grenades, and now I can customize stoneproof onto everybody in the party without having to try and rely on getting like a demonolith drop or anything like that. So that was definitely a useful one. Candle Life times 99, I mean zombie is rarely a status that you have to deal with at this stage, and it's kind of sad that more of the post game doesn't have zombie status, I think. But again, it's there if you want a bit more of that sort of zombie proof kind of protection. Poison Fang times 99, again poison proof. You can start to really like get these from enemy drops once you get to like Omega Ruins and like the low level Monster Arena and that kind of thing. But you never know. I mean, having the 99 Poison Fangs for easy poison proof whenever you want it can of course be useful. So like when you're entering, let's say, the Omega Ruins for the first time and you're trying to build an armor that's a bit more specific to get you through there, could definitely be useful. Next up, another important drop is the Healing Spring times 99, because with the Healing Springs you can of course get auto regen. Now for the HP that I have so far in the run, auto regen is not that useful because it's based on your maximum HP. So if you're having something that's hitting you pretty hard, then you're not going to be able to heal, like out heal it just using your auto regen. But again, in the future, if you are potentially able to get to a high level of HP, it can potentially become sort of sustaining in some battles where the auto regen healing alone is enough to keep you alive and you just spam attacks to win, and the auto regen takes care of all of that stuff. Now, once again, it's a bit like the light curtains in the sense that this isn't like the only way to get it, but if you do want to farm more of them, you have to be strong enough to at least defeat Kotos. Kotos, again, if I remember correctly, has like 440,000 HP and is a tough encounter for this particular stage. We won't be able to really beat him now unless we sort of maybe farm for a lot of different, like we have like auto Phoenix on 2 characters and use up a bunch of Phoenix downs and that kind of shit. It is possible, but it won't become easy to farm until a little bit later. But Healing Springs could potentially be very useful for high level battles in this challenge. Some of the items that you get from the original creations, like let's say Daughter Tomorrow and stuff, you could potentially use those to build some AP farming weapons if that's necessary, but I think for the kind of levels that we need, it should generally be fine. So then I had a quick scan through of what I was missing, and I did need to pick up another Evil Eye from Macalania, and there was a Behemoth that I needed to capture in the cave. For some reason I hadn't picked up 5 of those, I miscounted. So I very quickly went back and got those as well, because without the Evil Eye I couldn't unlock One Eye, which of course is one of the most necessary ones if you want to get any kind of AP farming equipment. So I had to spend a tiny bit more time in Macalania until I encountered another Evil Eye and then another Behemoth. So I returned a few minutes later to sort of finish this off. And so at this stage I made sure I had 5 of everything, and it was time to see what I could unlock without doing Omega Ruins. And you can see Omega Ruins is actually pretty important, because you come down to, let's say, the Species Conquest, and you start to notice that there's actually a decent amount of gaps there. And these are gaps that you can only fill if you've been capturing in the Omega Ruins. So for now, I decided to kind of leave it and see if I could still defeat Braska's Fine Leon anyway, without having to do Omega Ruins at the moment. Because I did pick up a lot of good stuff along the way already, and I picked up a lot of sphere levels, and I thought it's time to give this guy another go and see if I can manage it with the equipment and the stats that I have at this stage. And so once again, it was time to set up the team and see how I was doing in terms of my stats and my equipment before giving this thing another attempt. So I got everybody sort of the best equipment that I had for this particular battle, and decided to go from there. So for Titus, of course, once again, the piercing, the counter-attack stuff, if you have it, is also good. And any kind of thing that could benefit you, like Zombie Strike, for example, is also good. And so I was having a look at my options here. Now, I saw this Zombie Strike weapon, and I thought, you know what, if I have Zombie Strike, First Strike plus Evading Counter, that would be a nice thing to do, because obviously the U Pagodas end up healing Braska's Fine Leon, but if you end up giving him zombie status, at least some of that healing is wiped away. So I thought that might be a good idea moving forward. I had this nice SOS Protect, and I thought maybe I can roll with this as well. Again, I'm trying to reserve all of this like Auto Shell, Auto Protect, Auto Regen, all of this stuff for like the very high level battles. And I was trying to see if I could get away with sort of SOS stuff for now, which is much easier to get. But I knew I would likely be needing Auto Phoenix for everybody, so I did give him the Auto Phoenix. And at this stage I don't have more stamina tablets, unfortunately. It is something I can get, but I can make at least 2 more auto potions, so I thought it might be potentially a good idea to do that for now, and I can always sort of pick up more stamina tablets later on. So I did give Titus the auto potion as well, and already with auto potion, Auto Phoenix, SOS Protect, and I will be adding Stoneproof as well, I felt like he was much better equipped to be able to take on Braska's Fine Leon this time around. I did briefly have a look at Zombie Proof because the Triumphant Grasp Overdrive can give you Zombie, but I thought if I've got Auto Phoenixes, that should be enough to recover anyway, and Stoneproof was the more important status. And so for Titus, this is the armor that I decided to go for when facing Braska's Fine Leon on my next attempt. Now, I had 42 sphere levels for Sir Auron, and it was time to see how far this would take him along the road. So I spoke about kind of being able to level up a bit more during the capturing process, and I used that for Yuna, but I didn't really end up doing it for Auron so much. And so maybe I should have rotated him in a bit earlier, but I wanted to sort of make sure I did the monster capturing bit as quickly and as safely as possible. And so I did cut a few corners here and just made sure I finished that off pretty quickly. And so that meant that Auron could have got some more sphere levels, but he didn't at this stage. And I just wanted to see how far we could take him anyway. So as you can see here, once I cashed in all of Auron's sphere levels, his strength was looking nice, and so was his, well, his defense wasn't too bad, but you can see that 4000 HP is really not that good, and his agility is very low as well, and his magic defense is a whopping 7. So he definitely didn't really have the stats to take on Bras's Fine Leon at the moment, but I wanted to see how the other two were sort of shaping up, and what my plan was at this stage for Auron, who had to be in the battle. Yuna had plenty more sphere levels to work with, and she'd obviously been a part of the capturing process too, so she could pretty much be just as strong as Tidus, and so I decided to sort of keep her moving, and having at least 2 characters that were definitely at the sort of ballpark of stats needed to defeat Bras's Fine Leon, I think was definitely a wise idea. So I spent a little bit more time on Yuna as well, and leveling her up with the sphere levels that we picked up along the way. And so when we take a look at Yuna's stats, her ones are incredibly balanced compared to Tidus's. The HP stat I liked. I think 7,800 is a good number here, very solid. Agility is very high, 74 is excellent agility. Strength 69 I think is definitely good. It's not like perfect, but I think it's solid for this particular battle. And having like the 56 magic defense and stuff is also pretty nice. Now the defense itself is quite low, but if you look at like the total like averages of her stats, and especially the most relevant ones I would say at the moment, which are probably HP, strength and agility, I think they're on point, and they are generally close enough to definitely give Bras's Fine Leon a solid run. So I was happy with Yuna's stats after the monster capturing phase. And looking back to Tidus one more time, Tidus has 84 strength, so especially like even against Yuna, that's a notable step up. He does have better defense as well, but his agility is slightly less. So even though he's got less HP, his strength is very good, and so is his agility. So I think even with these stats it's enough, but I did have 99 sphere levels to cash in at this point, so I thought let me at least cash in some of these and get him now on the same sort of level as Yuna. So I didn't want to do all 99 because, like I said, then you start heading into just being completely OP and it not really being fun kind of territory. But I did want to give him at least 7,000 to start with, because I knew that Ultimate Jet Shot was a very dangerous move, and so I wanted to give him at least about 7,000 to try and protect against that. So it's time to have a look at Auron and see what kind of armor we can give him for the battle. And as you can see, scrolling through, he doesn't have anything that jumps out at me as being particularly great for this battle. I thought Stoneproof is the absolute bare minimum here that you need for Bras's Fine Leon, so I did give him the Stoneproof, but that took away some of his extra HP percentage as well, so he dropped down to 3,700. So it just wasn't looking very good. And at this stage I was getting a little bit impatient. I thought, you know what, I want to give Bras's Fine Leon another run here. So this is not what I would advise for preparation here for Bras's Fine Leon in terms of like the armor. But I thought, you know what, let's just give this a go and give him Stonewalled and some other stuff and see if that's going to be enough to basically be able to deal with Bras's Fine Leon with 2 strong characters and one that, quite frankly, is just not ready and shouldn't really be in the party at this stage. It was unlikely I'd be able to get away with it, but I thought it's worth a shot. So what I'm doing with Auron here is a little bit foolish, but this was like a bit of impatience at this stage, I will admit that. But I thought let's just give this a go and see how we do. So once everything was set up, I kind of deliberated a little bit about whether I should use this final slot for evading counter or whether I should use it for first strike. Now honestly I think it should have been evading counter here, but for some reason I decided to go for first strike instead. I was thinking that there's a lot of attacks that you can't evade, like in the second form, like the big sword swipe, you're not going to counter attack that. So I thought, you know what, maybe it's probably better, but I think on the balance of things I would say piercing, counter attack, like evading counter, and Zombie Strike are probably the better options. If you have a full slot, then obviously putting in First Strike would be great. But for now, at least, I think to get a better sort of head start on the battle, I decided to go with Zombie Strike and First Strike for Tidus in the end. And I think with that, I was like, let's just give this a go. And I feel like I should be much closer than I was on my first attempt, because now Yuna can also contribute. So we have 2 very solid attackers that can also use stuff like Auto Phoenix and potentially win me the battle. So I was looking forward to taking him on once more and seeing, even with this sort of nowhere near prepped Auron, could this be enough to get the job done. This time around, when I was doing the crystal mini game, again, I was a little bit more impatient, and as a result, it is very easy to run into these sort of icicle things. Even if you're trying to be careful, sometimes you just get unlucky. And of course, I encountered a triple demonolith in this particular one, so this was a bit of a difficult thing. Because I was prepared for Braska's Fine Leon as well, this was not good. So Auron's still doing 7,000 damage there, which is none too shabby. His 60 strength is definitely helpful. Like, it's less than everybody else, but it's enough to make a more meaningful contribution to the battle this time around. But triple demonoliths is just a horrible encounter if you're not specifically set up for them. So like, you don't have auto med, for example, and you're seeing the difference this is making. So I'm having you guys watch this just to see, like, with this particular challenge, you just can't take things for granted. It's very easy to mess things up. So because I was so geared towards Braska's Fine Leon and I wasn't really prepared, I could have basically put the armor that I needed now and then changed it when we actually got to like the chamber, like the final basic area to fight Braska's Fine Leon. But I thought I could make it through this bit without touching the crystals, and so as a result, you're seeing how badly I got punished here, and so I end up getting a game over because I touched the crystal. So that's how easy it is to screw things up in this particular challenge. You have to kind of always be on point, and it's harder and harder to find a one-size-fits-all, and I don't want to sacrifice very important one-time use items to try and make an armor. Because the challenge is so weird, there could be a really niche, like, weird type of armor that you need to make that might be like the only way to defeat a particular boss. So that's why I don't want to, let's say, use up all of my petrified grenades now and then sort of try to rely on farming demonoliths later on, or I don't know, use an auto shell or to do something like that. So that's why you take some liberties sometimes with that stuff, but as you can see, you end up getting punished if you're not careful as well. So we'll skip ahead to the battle now, because I did have to redo this bit. But I was even more careful, and second time round I did make it to Braska's Fine Leon once again. Okay, so here we go. About 3 hours after we first met, I am stronger than I was before. Not by like an incredibly huge amount, but these were sort of the stats and the setup that I had for my final attempt here. It's just Stoneproof and Auto Phoenix for Yuna, nothing else at the moment. And I thought, let's just give this a go and see if we can complete this game with the auto battle / attack only challenge. This is far from, this is not, I wouldn't say it's far from optimal, but it's definitely not optimal. But hopefully we'll be able to get it done still with this particular setup. Here we go. Okay, 9,000, and the zombie hits as well, so that's already a good start. This means that the first healing wave from the U Pagoda is actually going to damage Braska's Fine Leon. It's also going to take away the zombie status. Good critical from Auron there, by the way. It's going to take away the zombie status, and then the second healing wave is going to heal back. So there's going to be a net HP change of 0 for this particular one, but it's going to be worth it, because it's going to be a net change of 0 versus a plus 3,000 if we didn't give him zombie. So at the moment it's looking pretty good. So I called it healing wave, it's power wave. So you're going to see BFA take damage here, but he's going to be healed of the status, and then the second one is going to end up healing. Still definitely worth zombie if you are sort of a bit lower level and you're trying to keep pace with Braska's Fine Leon and his healing. But you're already seeing the difference in damage here. Auron with 60 strength doing 2,800, Yuna doing 4,400, and Tidus, okay, that was a critical, doing quad 9. But like, even with piercing, the strength really starts to make a massive difference at this particular stage. So even like a plus 15, you're going to be noticing a pretty significant change in the damage here. But those power waves just keep on rolling, and again, that's why having Zombie Strike is a generally decent way to try and keep up with the damage. So I could have given Yuna and Auron Zombie Strike as well to really increase the chances that we have Braska's Fine Leon zombified for any given turn. But there you go, it hit again, thankfully. And so damage output is not too bad here. I mean, we're doing about, like, anywhere from about 12 to 16k damage for all three of our characters. So Triumph of Grass comes in, and Auron, being the legend that he is, of course survives that. But because of that zombie effect that I mentioned, and that's why I was wondering, is it worth having zombie protection? He kills himself with the auto potion. But I have 2 Auto Phoenixes here, so I was like, that's not too big a deal here. And so we Auto Phoenix him back to life, and we basically continue along the road. And Form 2 looks all but inevitable at this particular stage. So Form 1, I mean, we beat it even with the lower stats and a bit less preparation, so I wasn't too worried. And here it comes, the transition. So this was going to be the acid test. Now, Auron was already in trouble because he can't survive a sword swipe, and we would just have to see what was going to happen with Yuna and Tidus, with Auto Phoenix and Tidus having SOS Protect against the second form. So we'll see. We still haven't seen an ultimate jet shot yet either. That was one of the main reasons also I rushed a little bit as well, because I just had to see how much damage that was doing before being fully clued up on the battle itself. Because if you make all those preparations and ultimate jet shot is doing like 8,000–9,000 damage, then you need to, obviously, it's an HP check, and you'd have to make sure you have more HP regardless. So once again the zombie hits, and here comes the first swipe. Yeah, big damage. But we're still looking okay here, but Yuna's not going to survive another sword swipe, which is a problem. And we've all been delayed as well, of course, as a result of the swipe. So this phase just genuinely gets very difficult here. And that overdrive is coming very quickly. Now thankfully ultimate jet shot only happens when he's down to his last 60,000 HP, but I was already starting to fear the worst once again, because that sword swipe is just so powerful. And my strength is solid, but my defense stats are not that great across the board. But yeah, now I have the luxury of at least kind of taking a breather and trying to think. Even though I'm not going to do anything different, I'm just kind of thinking ahead to like what could happen in this battle and what the potential outcomes could be, depending on what he chooses to do here. But getting lots of nice criticals here, which is cool. Now here's the second form Triumphant Grasp. And this one is going to be slightly more painful, and you can see Yuna needs pretty much max HP to be able to survive that one. But once again, Auto Phoenix doing its job here, so I'm not too worried. And once they come back from the Auto Phoenix, they have enough HP to survive a sword swipe, which is also important. So at this stage, I was actually thinking I can make it through. The only thing standing in my way is looking like ultimate jet shot. So let's see what's going to happen here. I was getting a bit tense. But you can see those power waves are just so relentless. And that's why agility starts to become a big factor in this battle as well. Like, my characters have good agility. You saw Tidus and Yuna with over 70. But, like, Braska's Fine Leon and the U Pagodas keep up generally very well with fast characters. Unless you have SOS Haste or, like, Auto Haste or something like that. But that next overdrive is coming, and I was already like, is he below 60,000? Is it time for ultimate jet shot? I was trying to, like, in my mind, like, calculate roughly how much damage I would have done and stuff like that, but it's hard to keep up when you have such variations in damage and not everybody's hitting for quad 9 and that kind of thing. But these little auto potions, they're helping here. They're keeping him above that threshold to survive the sword swipe when it comes. I mean, 2 jet beams in a row is actually pretty rare in the second form, especially. Here we go. Alright, next overdrive coming soon. We're definitely not going to be able to beat him. He's got way too much HP at the moment. So we won't be winning this time. Here it is. Okay, ultimate jet shot. So I knew I had him below 60,000 HP. Let's have a look at one of the most impressive overdrives of the entire game. It's so unique compared to so much of the other stuff that we've seen. It's really, really cool. This really harkens back to like the old Final Fantasy games, this kind of move. Like Final Fantasy 8 kind of stuff, Final Fantasy 7. And there you go. So I got wiped out, but the damage wasn't too bad. So it was around the 4,000 mark. So we did get a game over, but I thought to myself, I got below 60,000 on this attempt, and I almost survived. At this stage it had become clear that 100% we can definitely win, and the main way that I could have won in the previous attempt was basically to sell all of my high potions and use X potions instead. That was one thing, and also to give myself a little bit more breathing room, I decided to give Tidus a little bit more in terms of his stats, basically fill in like one more little portion of the grid, so that I could basically do quad 9 damage at will, and give myself an extra smidge of HP so that when we are revived with Auto Phoenix, for example, I have that little extra buffer to be able to survive as well. So that was the main thing. I pushed Tidus along a little bit further, so he had slightly better stats than he did before. That was the first thing I did, and then the second thing I did was to go and sell my high potions so that I only had X potions left. Now normally I'm doing my best to conserve the X potions, but because this battle is after the point of no return, you don't need to conserve them anymore, and so you can just use X potions in the battle, and make sure you're at full health basically every time you use a potion using the auto potion ability in your equipment in this battle. So those were the main changes that I did, nothing too special, just a little bit extra for Tidus, and also making sure that I had no high potions in my inventory so that I would use X potions whenever I fell into SOS HP. And with that, I was ready for what I was hoping would be the final winning attempt against Braska's final Aeon. Once again, in hindsight for Tidus, I would have preferred to have counter-attack instead of first strike. I don't think first strike is that important, but again, as you saw in the battle as well, it's not that big a deal. And depending on what kind of RNG happens, evading counter might not really trigger at all in the battle. And so it's not like a massive difference, but I think looking back on it, I probably still would have gone for counter-attack. And so for Auron, piercing, counter-attack, and first strike for him. And he also has his little auto potion armor as well, which honestly is not going to be that helpful, I think, at this stage. But for Auron, it wasn't that important. It was mostly the Yuna and Tidus show, and Auron was kind of just like the guardian figure there, just sort of trying to accompany them to the final journey, because I tried to refrain from basically taking time out to boost his stats before the final fight. And so these were the final stats that I had. Strength almost at 100 now, defense still at 47, agility all the way up to 91 at this stage, and luck of 30. Looking at these stats, the only thing I wish would be a little bit higher was probably defense and magic defense, but I tried to make up for it with having a lot of HP and obviously being very powerful. So this was the team, these were the stats, this was the setup against the final storyline boss of the game. Let's go. Okay, here we go for hopefully the last time. Let's get straight into it. Start attacking Braska's final Aeon and see if we got enough in the tank to see it through this time. So yeah, pretty much guaranteed quad 9 now from Tidus, thanks to taking another little boost in his strength. Auron and Yuna will be the same as you saw in the previous battle. Now it's more a case of can X Potion do its job, and what will happen with the RNG, because he did use Jet Beam twice in a row in the previous battle, and that kind of really helped me out because those are free moves basically. And so if he decided to use, let's say, Sword Swipe twice in a row instead of the Jet Beam, then things could have looked very different. So it was by no means like a foregone conclusion that I'd win here, but if I had generally favourable or like average RNG, I think it was likely that I'd be able to get the win. The only way I think I could have failed in this particular attempt would be if I got a lot of Sword Swipes and things were just not going well on that front. So let's see how we go here. Jet Beam on Auron was... that was like a little bit of RNG right there, because he had a 50% chance of being able to not get petrified. And so I won the coin toss of not getting petrified, which was good, because then this battle could have potentially ended already. Tidus and Yuna might have been able to carry the rest of the battle themselves if we're lucky, but I think having one more sort of target for attacks is probably still the best way to move here. But yeah, seeing that Jet Beam being aimed towards Auron, my heart sank a little bit. I thought I've got to do this again. And because I'm playing on PC version, I don't have any save states, so I would have had to do the crystal minigame again, which would have been definitely annoying. I got the cutscene skipper in effect, but obviously I can't skip the crystal minigame, so that would have definitely been annoying. So here we go. Second form once again, and we'll see how many sword swipes we have to deal with this time. That is basically like the killer move, I think, of the second form, other than obviously ultimate jet shot itself. So Auron again, I don't think he can even survive one sword swipe unless he gets a bit lucky, because his defense is pretty good. But once again, it's Auron that gets hit with this. He's going to get KO'd here. He doesn't have the HP to survive this. But of course we've got our Auto Phoenix heroes here, and they'll pick him right back up. There we go. But again, sword swipe comes, Auron's definitely KO'd here. And Yuna doesn't have auto potion on her armor, so if we get 2 sword swipes in a row, then Yuna dies as well. She's not going to have enough HP to survive both. So let's see what type of RNG we're getting here in the second form. I'm pretty sure this has to be a sword swipe. He always opens with a sword swipe, so this one is not RNG. This is just the way it goes. And Yuna, a very clutch evasion there, as you would have seen. Evasion stats, man. It's underrated sometimes, I swear. Like, everyone's obviously always obsessed with luck because of Dark Aeons and all that kind of thing. But sometimes, like for storyline stuff, brute, like evasion can sometimes win the day. So you saw her evade that sword swipe like a boss, and for that reason she gets to survive one more sword swipe overall, which is very big. Let's see what happens here. Overdrive, he has over 60,000 HP, so again the timing here is actually quite favourable for me, because I don't have to face an ultimate jet shot. Now, depending on how your kind of timing and the attacks go, it is potentially possible that you could get him down to, like, say, 65,000 HP. He uses Triumphant Grasp instead of the ultimate jet shot, and then you kill him before the next overdrive fills up, so you never see ultimate jet shot. But we'll just have to see what happens in this particular run here, because the overdrive gauge fills so quickly, it's very unlikely that you'll do 60 to 65,000 damage or 70,000 damage in between Jex overdrives with the characters that I have at the moment. Those power waves are just absolutely relentless. And again, because of the challenge, obviously I can't hit the U Pagodas anyway, so I have to deal with their moves. This was nice for Tidus. Again, free move, and it gives him a free boost back up to full HP. So that was really good. So I've definitely had some pretty good RNG so far in this fight, I would say. And at this stage we're looking good, because even if ultimate jet shot comes now, I know for a fact that Tidus will be able to survive it with the HP that he has. Now, if a sword swipe comes, which it does, then things get interesting, because Yuna's going to die from the ultimate jet shot. Tidus will be the only one who can survive this. Now remember, I gave him an extra 400 to 500 HP here. So this could make all of the difference. Those extra, like, two, I think they're literally 2 HP spheres that I gave him. Let's see what's going to happen here. Ultimate jet shot coming in. Let's see what would have happened if Tidus had like 4,200 HP instead. It might have made a difference. It'd be very tight, but it could have saved his life. Fine margins here. And again, Auto Phoenix, if Tidus survives this, which he should based on what we saw last time, then the game is ours, because he'll be able to revive his comrades. 3,600. So yeah, he took the least damage because his defense stat is pretty good, and so the extra 400 HP ended up not being necessary here. It was more so the X potion that ended up saving the day. But look at all of these autos kicking in. If you're doing an auto battle challenge, you better have some auto armor to be able to get you out of these situations. So at this stage it seemed pretty certain that I should be able to get this done and defeat Braska's final Aeon in the Final Fantasy X auto battle / attack only challenge. So the final few hits to come in still. But 120,000 is pretty chunky HP, so he's not quite done yet. He's putting up a fight here. He's going to take out Auron again. But Auto Phoenix. But if another sword swipe comes in again, this time Yuna gets taken out too. But because Auto Phoenixes can revive both of their party members, barring those very specific situations I mentioned in previous battles like Spectral Keeper, again I felt pretty safe here. You can see that overdrive gauge creeping up. What if we had to face another ultimate jet shot? That could potentially be a problem depending on what happens here. Let's see. Okay, that's not too bad. But another ultimate jet shot here again is going to take out Yuna and Auron, but thankfully Tidus has enough HP to survive it once again. So it really was, if Tidus had like say 6,700 HP, something like that, then there might have been a chance that we wouldn't have been able to win here. So I think like the 6,500 to 7,000 HP kind of level I think is what's needed to be able to win here for at least one of your characters if they have an Auto Phoenix. Because you can see, like, I'm not able to get the job done. And you have to face a second ultimate jet shot here. So this could have really gone wrong. I mean, it wasn't like a absolutely easy sort of clear sweep here. He definitely put up a good fight, and it was pretty close. But since we've already seen the damage that Tidus takes, there's just absolutely no way, even with random variants, he can't take enough damage to die here. So yeah, that extra defense, you're seeing like the slight difference in damage that he's taking compared to Yuna and even Auron. So that extra bit of defense is making all the difference. But this auto Phoenix plus auto potion is just proving too much for Braska's Fine Leon to handle, and so his son is coming through and handling business here. And there it is, the final boss of the game being defeated in the Final Fantasy X Auto Battle / Attack Only challenge. We've done it, my friends. We have made it to the end of the storyline bosses for Final Fantasy X. This challenge was incredibly fun, I have to say. It's the most fun I've had in a challenge for a very long time. P Birdman mod was an absolutely amazing time. And if anyone hasn't watched the P Birdman mod, I've got to quickly plug that as we're fighting the Aeons and you, Yevon, here. The P Birdman mod was probably like one of the most cool collaborative things I've done on the channel, because I got to work with someone whose Final Fantasy X knowledge I absolutely adore and admire greatly. And so when the time came for me to try out his mod someday, there had never been anyone that had made it past the Calmlands. And with my experience and my knowledge of the game, I said to him, look, why don't I try to play through the mod as well? I'll test it for you, and I'll share my feedback, and together we can maybe try to make some more tweaks and improvements. And that process ended up taking almost 2 years, because the mod was pretty much already finished when I started, but he'd never really collaborated with anyone else on it. It was a very solo project, and it hadn't really been tested all that much. And so I was able to come in and do my testing and try out the different battles and offer my advice. And we had the community feedback, and I was uploading an episode every week or every 2 weeks or something like that. And it turned into a wonderful project that I really, really enjoyed. And a lot of people had a lot of fun playing and watching as well. So that's like my little kind of plug for the P Birdman mod, because I think anyone enjoying this would definitely be more likely to enjoy the P Birdman mod and see the sort of masterful way in which he's designed it. And you can see my first experience in testing it out and sharing my feedback with P Birdman, and how we ended up sort of producing a few updates to it that I think ultimately, in many cases, did end up making the mod even better than it already was. So that's something I definitely recommend you guys to watch after this particular series, if you want to see more sort of unique Final Fantasy X content that isn't just sort of a standard playthrough. So definitely recommended. But for this series, I would say this is the end of Season 1. If people have been watching so far, I've generally tried to do my best to not kind of spoil what's ahead, because obviously the whole kind of premise was, how far can I even get with this? And if I said to you guys, you know, from episode 2 onwards that, oh yeah, I've already completed the game and here's how I did it, then I think that's a bit less fun than sort of leaving you guys in a bit of suspense and wondering what's coming next. So I did that for most of the story, and although I'm sure a lot of experienced players knew how far you could go with this, there's definitely a lot of people that were sort of eagerly awaiting what was going to happen, trying to predict where the challenge would hit a brick wall and where it would get too difficult, and all of this kind of stuff. And so that was a really fun part of the challenge for me as well. But now I kind of want to step away from that a little bit, because I have, of course, been talking about what the future could hold for this particular playthrough. And so obviously I'd made it this far, and I was absolutely buzzing to have reached the end, because genuinely starting out, it was such a weird challenge compared to anything I'd done before. I genuinely had no idea how far I could take it. And so at the start, that wasn't me trying to be dramatic and hype it up to be like, oh man, this could be an impossible challenge, I could fail in the first 10 minutes or whatever. I genuinely had no idea how far I could go. And so once I made it this far and I was fighting you, Yevon, I was like, this is awesome. And I knew that there was still so much left in the tank, because there's still a ton of the sphere grid that I haven't done. We picked up some high level stuff from the monster arena, and there was still a lot to do. We had the Omega Ruins to do, we had to fight Ultima Weapon, we had to fight Omega Weapon, we had to fight everything in the monster arena, and then we had to fight Dark Aeons. So I thought to myself, there is no way I can leave this challenge here. I gotta know how many of those guys I can defeat. And so yes, I did continue on, and I did fight more of the enemies that are available in the game, and there is more content to come from this challenge. So if you've been having a good time, then I am pleased to announce that there is going to be more. This is the end of the storyline portion, obviously, but there is going to be more to come. Now, it is going to come to a stage where there's going to need to be more heavy grinding. So let's say you want to take on like the original creations in the monster arena that have millions of HP. You're going to have to take a time out and just sort of maybe take 5 hours out to grind. So there's going to be more chunks that I edit out, and there's going to be more battles where I'm forced to become OP. I don't really have too much choice. Just got to become OP and just spam that attack and sort of finish it off. It might not always be quite as nuanced as some of the battles you've seen in the storyline portion, but I am excited to be able to bring you guys more from this. And just generally, at this stage, we are playing the game of how far can we take this? What is possible? Can you actually defeat Dark Aeons with this particular challenge? And if you can, how many of them can you defeat? Can you defeat all of them? Can you get to Penance? Can you defeat Penance? Who the hell knows? A lot of questions still remain, so I'm looking forward to being able to answer some of those for you guys. So the series will continue. Depending on how busy I am behind the scenes, it's already been a bit of a difficult last sort of 6 weeks or so to try and juggle everything on the channel, because there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. I'm trying to move into a new place. For the first time, I've basically got my own place in London, and so it's been a tough process to try and sort of get everything together and be a first time mover into a new place. I've lived in my parents' house the entire time I've lived in London. So it's a bit of a big step for me, and so I've been working a lot on that behind the scenes while trying to do all of like the Resident Evil and all of the usual stuff that I do on the channel as well. So I might need to take a break for like one sort of 2-week slot and then come back. So maybe 2 weeks time you won't see an episode, but then the 2 weeks after we will continue. I need to abruptly put a cut into this little outro thing, because at this stage when I was doing the voiceover, I was very relieved to have reached the end of the series, and I was getting ready to start doing my long sign off outro, talk about the series so far, the experience, thank everybody, what's still to come, what's been going on, all that kind of stuff. And while I was doing that, I kind of glossed over something that was actually very important and very interesting about the final battle. Apologies for my voice. I have had a sore throat for the last 3 or 4 days. I've been trying to wait to see if it clears up, but I think it's going to take another few days before it's fully back to normal. But I thought, let me just record this because I'm running out of time before this episode goes live. I wanted to make sure I put this extra piece of voiceover in there. I do think it's pretty interesting, because I hadn't originally spotted it, because Yevon is not really a battle that I ever really concentrate on too much. And as you guys saw in the video so far, I mean, it just looked like a formality like every other Yevon battle pretty much in history is. But when I was actually editing the voiceover and preparing the Patreon episode, I had a bit of a light bulb moment, and I realized that something actually really interesting could have happened with this battle instead of what you guys had seen. So I had to take a little bit of time to record this extra piece of voiceover and show you guys something that I think you'll find interesting, because it's very specific to this particular challenge and to my playthrough. So let me explain exactly what I mean here. Whenever I get to Braska's Final Aeon, the only thing I'm ever thinking about is the Braska's Final Aeon battle itself, and not really about Yevon, because Yevon, as we all know, is kind of designed as a formality. It's not really viewed as the true final boss of the game. The whole story kind of leads you up into understanding what Yevon is and what it's become, and obviously you face this sort of weird, like, floating beetle, tick-looking thing, and it's usually very helpless. Like, yes, it can heal itself with Curaga and it has Power Wave and that kind of thing, but all of us have always found a way to deal with it. And because we have this sort of auto life as well, it is almost literally impossible, unless you deliberately do it to yourself, it's impossible to lose against Yevon. But in this particular challenge, in this particular setup, it is actually possible to lose. And the way that you would lose here is by basically getting yourself into an infinite loop where Yevon continually just heals itself and maintains itself at maximum HP without you being able to break through. So let me break this down a little bit more, because when I was preparing for Braska's Final Aeon, of course, I was thinking about Zombie Strike, but it wasn't actually that essential. It's just something that I like to add on as like a little bit of a bonus. I'm pretty sure I can win without it anyway, but at the end of the day, it was available. I'm not going to need it for any other battle specifically, because it's at the point of no return. So if I had the slots and the items to customize it, sure, give myself a Zombie Strike. The U Pagodas can heal a little bit less, and that will obviously benefit me. That's as far as my thinking went when I was actually doing the Zombie Strike. But it turns out without that, you are going to get yourself stuck with this particular setup. So the reason why that is because Yevon is programmed to use Curaga on itself for quad 9 healing every time you attack it. So of course this means that if you don't have a weapon that can break the damage limit,
or that can do multiple hits. So if you're doing attack only or auto battle, which apparently is possible, I did toggle auto battle, and you're seeing like the version where you're going to get stuck now in the background. I recorded this as extra to show you guys how it works. But all that's going to happen is that your characters are going to do quad 9 damage. Yevon's just going to heal it, and in my case it's even worse because Auron can't hit quad 9 damage. So Auron's doing about 6,000, Tidus and Yuna are both doing quad 9. So what happens is that Yevon is basically going to be able to heal every single time we attack it, and we're not going to be able to chip away any of that HP. The U Pagodas now and then are going to be firing in their power waves as well to give it an extra 3,000 HP every time they do that too. And so when you start to factor this all together, it ends up being an impossible battle, because normally there's a lot of tricks that you can use against Yevon to make sure that you win, even if you're very underpowered. So the first one that we all know, a classic one, is of course to cast Reflect on it. So if you cast Reflect on Yevon, even if you have no Sphere Grid stats, it becomes impossible for Yevon to heal itself, so you can chip away the damage very slowly over time. So that's one of the things that you can do, but obviously in this challenge we can't put Reflect on Yevon, so that doesn't work. 2, at least one of your characters is OP anyway, maybe all of them are OP, and they can do more than quad 9 damage, so you can just literally out damage, you can blast through anyway. That's another way. 3, you can use stuff like multiple hit overdrives, so instead of doing one quad 9 attack, you can do a 12 hit attack reels, or you can do a blitz ace, or you can do something like that, and you can, again, you can take out the HP quicker than Yevon can heal it. And another interesting ingredient to this whole situation is that normally Yevon uses the Gravija move, and the way that it's done is that it does 75% of your HP, but it would also be a move in which Yevon damages itself. And so maybe if Gravija was used as well, then eventually you'd be able to chip away enough, including the Gravija damage that it does to itself. But if it's done at least 7 Curagas between whenever it gets a move, it bypasses that and it heads straight to Ultima, which in our case is actually worse, because Ultima doesn't hit Yevon itself, it only KOs your characters, who then just get revived with auto life anyway. So with this particular setup, because of my agility stat, I get too many turns in, so we don't see Gravija, there's not enough time for Yevon to use Gravija in the battle, and if you don't have a way to inflict zombie status with your weapon, then you can't utilize any of the other tricks with the particular setup that I have. So that's why it's really funny, I was literally one weapon ability away from getting completely stuck on this one, and having to redo the entire Braska's Final Aeon battle, and then give myself a zombie strike to be able to win. So that's something I wanted to mention because it was really interesting, and it's very rare for Yevon to ever pose any kind of problem in any kind of challenge. And so the fact that this particular playthrough and this particular setup and like the stat distribution that I have and the restrictions that I have meant that Yevon could have actually been a stumbling block for me in this challenge, which would have been really funny. Part of me kind of wishes I didn't customize it, because it would have been really fun to sort of have a version of events where I did forget about that and I had to basically face a brick wall, fail against Yevon and then try again. But when I was actually watching it back, like I say, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, if I didn't actually afflict this guy with zombie, I think I wouldn't have been able to win. And so it's something that I really had to share, because Yevon's such a unique boss in that regard, and I think a lot of people watching it would have appreciated it. So yeah, even though I have a bit of a sore throat, I waited for a couple of days to see if it would clear up, but my voice is still not back to 100%, so apologies for the sort of ill-sounding voice right now. But it's a little piece of extra voiceover that I want to have, especially for this final boss in this final episode that's going to be a bit longer than the others anyway. So that's the final word on Yevon, and now I can return back to sort of my long outro where I'm going to sort of wrap things up for the end of this sort of Season 1 of the Final Fantasy Auto Battle / Attack Only Challenge. So let's get back to the original voiceover now.
And I did promise people to do a randomizer run of Final Fantasy X, like a live streamed one. That is still the plan, but because this series sort of just came in like a wrecking ball and so many people were interested, and it was a new type of content for me and it was doing so well, I didn't want to sort of over spam the Final Fantasy X content. I didn't want to be doing a live stream Final Fantasy X run while also uploading this series as well. So once this finishes, we will be moving on to Final Fantasy X Randomizer, and by the time that finishes, I would have not actually played Final Fantasy X again for quite a long time, because I finished the recording for this challenge a long time ago. But because of like the format that I like to upload in, and the editing style and the presentation style, this sort of fortnightly release works well for me, and I like to build a little bit of hype for each episode and try to make each episode its own sort of unique experience and that kind of thing. And so yeah, I could have very much just dumped a lot of stuff very quickly, but that's generally not my style. I like to try and plan and edit and curate my channel and the way I upload things a little bit more than maybe people want me to sometimes. But ultimately I think it leads to like a nice flow and a nice way of presenting content that I've liked to do for years. And you guys have always generally been very kind and responsive towards it. And even if people are kind of upset that there's not more regular episodes, I take that as a good thing in terms of people are enjoying it so much that they always want more. And it's never enough. Like if you upload like once a week, there's always going to be some portion of the audience out there saying like, I could watch 2 episodes a week. And so you have to find that sort of sweet balance. And for me, for this particular series, I think this has worked really nicely. And it's been a huge boost for the channel because it's, I have mentioned it once or twice, but 2022 was a pretty poor year for the channel. Despite like huge games like Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok and stuff coming out, in general, it was one of the worst years I've had in recent times. And so I was a little bit down on things. It was one of those where when you've been in the game as long as I have, you never take things for granted, and you're always working hard to try and maintain your channel, to keep moving in the right direction, to keep producing the best content you can. And when things started not going so well, it was always like a bit of a, is this sort of the slow decline and the beginning of the end? And, are people getting bored of the content? What's going wrong? There was a little bit of soul searching going on in 2022. And this series was such a, it really was like a mega elixir for the channel, because it just solved so many problems for me. Because obviously one of the things was that in general, yes, the views weren't doing as well as they should be. The series got the views. 2, stuff like Patreon was starting to suffer a little bit because I couldn't quite provide the kind of content on there that I wanted. This type of content works super well for Patreon as well, because it's a nice way to encourage people, if they have the means to, and you can give them a nice meaningful perk with the early access without creating a legitimate paywall for people to actually watch your content. Because I've always maintained that style on Patreon. You never have to pay to access content that people wouldn't be able to access for free at a later time anyway. So you never have to pay for Dan's Go 8 content in that context. And so it's something I can maintain for that as well. And so this series, it really helped with the Patreon. And as I've been saying throughout the series, you guys have been absolutely awesome on that front. And I can never understate how important Patreon is for content creators. Not just me, any content creator whose content you watch regularly and you want to support, even literally joining at whatever their lowest tier is, I promise you, it makes a massive difference in comparison to just watching the content. And so this series was wonderful to be able to do that as well. And so thank you to everybody that's joined throughout this series. I appreciate you guys a lot. But for anyone that's been a patron for a really long time, that's been there for years now, like I say, I cannot overstate how important you guys have been to the channel. And it's one of the primary ways in which I can continue to make content full time, because without it, genuinely without any Patreon or any of the channel memberships, I think at this stage it would have started to get a bit too much for me, and I would have had to start to look into basically moving back into a different type of job once again, and having YouTube be like a side thing that I can only dedicate like 20% of the time I dedicate to it at the moment. So you guys really are an important force in keeping the channel moving, and anyone that's sort of still considering whether they should or they shouldn't, or if even like the smallest $1 subscription, is that going to help? It genuinely does. And so this series has been great for that as well. But the absolute most important thing for this series was that it was a wonderful way to go back to the roots of why I started this channel. The primary reason this channel existed was to upload challenge runs of Final Fantasy X. That's what I started with. And so there's like no Sphere Grid runs on there, there's no Sphere Grid Auron only, Steal and Use exception, there's no Sphere Grid Riku only, no overdrives, there's no Sphere Grid Dark Aeons of course. That's always been my background. Challenges in Final Fantasy X is the reason you're all watching this video right now. The core of where the channel began has always been challenges. So it wasn't this sort of new thing where I was doing walkthroughs and then I saw like this sort of challenge format doing well on YouTube and thought, hey, let me just jump on this. I was doing this in 2008. And so even though I had a very kind of long absence from it, the P Birdman mod was kind of a return to it, but I see like modded playthroughs and challenges as being slightly different in my mind. And so this was an idea that when it sort of clicked, I thought this would be a great piece of content for the channel. On my phone, I keep a set of notes. Anytime I have like an idea for content for the channel, I write it down. And on there, for at least about a year or so, there was FFX Auto Battle. That's all I wrote down, because I knew that's something I wanted to kind of test out and see what I could do with it. And so in time, I decided to give it a go, and I had no idea that it would turn into the series that it eventually did. And it's been a massive success because I got to enjoy a really quirky, different kind of challenge that took me back to my roots. And you guys responded in such a big way as well. It absolutely ticked all of the boxes, and it was some of the best content I've made in quite some time. So that's a general sort of sign off here, because it's been quite a long series. I want to give you guys a little bit of a outro here for the end of season 1, because it has been a pretty long series. So I want to take a little bit of time just to thank you all once again, and just to share a few thoughts and feelings having reached the end of the storyline portion of the playthrough. So where do we go from here? As has been the general format for Final Fantasy X content on the channel, once the storyline is finished, the first thing we do is we head to the Omega Ruins, and we see if we can get through the encounters there and see if we can beat Omega Weapon. So that's going to be the first trial that we're going to do in the next session that I upload for you guys. But for now, I am going to be signing off. It's been a wonderful time to do this challenge, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing more. In the meantime, if you are looking for content to watch like this, then I definitely recommend the P. Birdman playthrough. That's more like a walkthrough style, but that one was a ton of fun to upload, and you'll see some boss battles and some moves and some mechanics that you would never have seen in Final Fantasy before, made by an absolute master of the game in P. Birdman. So 100% recommend watching that. If you really want to go old school, like I say, I've got some very old challenges on the channel that could potentially blow your mind, especially if you're like a newer player to the game and you're not that clued up on challenges, but you've been finding it interesting. Then going back and watching, let's say, No Sphere Grid Riku only could be fascinating for you, because No Sphere Grid is already difficult enough as it is, but it turns out that Riku can beat the game with No Sphere Grid by herself. So if that's blowing your mind already, then definitely recommend going back in time and searching for that kind of stuff as well, and you can see where sort of the roots of the Dansgoe experience on YouTube came from back in the day. So I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you all so much for watching. I will be back with more from this series soon, and we will be seeing if we can auto battle all the way to Penance. Basically, the limit is Penance and beating every single boss in the game. We've got to set the bar high, and we will see how close we get to doing that over the coming episodes. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care.